A teenager finds a magical book and becomes a purveyor of death. I discuss this and more on today's episode. Welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I've found in my travels, and I have something pretty strange for you today. I am still on that manga grind, and I am talking about a manga that is about death and death gods and magical books. I am referring to Deathnote Volume 1 by Tsugumi Ohba, and with art by Takeshi Obata, and this was published around 2003. For those who don't know, Tsugumi Ohba is a Japanese writer, primarily writing manga. They've been writing a couple different series, but they're most primarily known for the Deathnote series, which was turned into an anime as well as a movie, given it was a pretty bad Netflix movie, but in a so bad it's kind of good way. It's being adapted. People seem to like it. I don't know too much about their other series that they've written, but those kind of seem popular or interesting to people. It should also be noted that Tsugumi Ohba is a pen name. Nobody really knows who Ohba is in real life, like who actually wrote the Deathnote series. And some people speculate that it might just be other writers who are coming together to write this series rather than one singular person, which I think is interesting. But if you happen to have a guess about who Tsugumi Ohba actually is, let me know, or say it in the comments. I would be happy to hear about that. Happy to hear your various conspiracy theories. But without further ado, let's talk about Deathnote Volume 1. I will do a summary, a little bit of analysis, and we will move on from there. So Deathnote focuses on Light Yagami. He is a smart teenager who's viewed as number one or close to number one in the country for academics. But at the beginning of the story, we find out that he is bored, doesn't really have a lot going on, and he ends up finding a book on the ground which claims to be a magical book that allows you to write people's names in it and specify their causes of death, and they will in fact die that way. Meanwhile, we also learn about a Shinigami, a death god, who lives in the death realm and is very bored there as well. Doesn't really seem to be too happy with the way things are going in that realm. And so he seems to drop his book in the human realm as a way of sort of spicing things up. And he proceeds to follow Light Yagami around and tell him of the secrets of the Death Note and let him know the rules. Although he says he's not really on Light's side, he just wants to see how it's going to turn out. And Light, for his part, doesn't seem to be afraid of the Shinigami, he pretty much says that he wants to choose who's going to die and punish the bad people in the world so that he can reign over the other people and make a world that is a kind of a utopia, even though it's not really a utopia if he's choosing who gets to live or die. Meanwhile, Interpol is becoming suspicious of the number of deaths that are taking place without any real cause. They're just heart attacks, but people seem to be targeting the prisoners of the world, which isn't an ethical thing to do. So Interpol tries to investigate, but they have no leads, and so they finally decide to turn to a sleuth named L, who can investigate pretty well. And they proceed to go on the news and start taunting Kira, Lord Kira, who that's the nickname that the world has given Light here. Even though they don't know who he is, they feel that someone is doing all of this. And L shows up and says his name, which Light proceeds to write that name in the book, but we find out that was a prisoner, and that L was really trying to figure out more about Light in the process, which he in fact finds out that Light must be doing this all from a very specific part of Japan, and this worries Light. But he seems to have accounted for it as well, and it's basically a cat and mouse kind of game from here. Light also has the benefit of, as we find out, that his father is a detective on the case, so he can access certain knowledge in order to find out about the case, which L seems to figure out and begins investigating the detectives on the case and their families. Meanwhile, Light realizes that the Death Note might attract suspicion, so he hides it, and he basically sets it so that if anyone finds it, his entire room catches on fire and burns the book. And then Light begins experimenting with the causes and conditions of death, which will make it not look like he's a teenager at school during most of the day and writing down names when he gets home after school. But even L starts to catch on that Light might be trying to tell them something by having the people die in specific ways there. And L realizes that he can't really trust the Japanese police, so he begins turning to the American FBI, who he invites into the country. And Light begins to realize that he's being sort of trailed by an agent, and so he invites this girl out on a date and writes a specific thing in the Death Note that a bus that he's on will be attacked, and the man who's been following him is also on the bus. And so when the bus is attacked, Light asks the man, like, who should I think? How do I know I can trust you? And that FBI agent reveals that he is named Ray Penber, and they manage to stop the man who has been attacking the bus. But it's Light's ultimate victory, because now he knows who Ray Penber is, and he can kind of manipulate him. But that's where Volume 1 ends there. In terms of analysis, there's a little bit worth talking about with Volume 1 of Death Note. One of the main ideas that Ohba is writing about here is that of morality. Ohba has his characters arguing about the ethics of the murders that are taking place in this story. Light believes he is justified due to the criminal's actions. One person was holding a bunch of children hostage, and so Light feels justified in killing that person. But another time, like a man accosts a woman, like he starts like chatting her up and saying mean and sexist things to her, or just rude things to her, and so Light feels he's justified in having that man killed. And then there are others who are in prison who did bad things, and Guts feels justified in having them killed. And others see him as right. They begin referring to him as Lord Kira. They see that they sense that he's not doing anything wrong. He's just getting rid of the wicked and allowing the good to survive, thereby creating a sort of utopia or a better society where less crime is taking place. Allow me to read you an interesting quote from this. "This is what human beings are like, Ryuk. Say in school we have a discussion in class. There's no way the subject would be, is it all right to kill someone evil? But let's say that was the subject. Everyone would act all virtuous and say, no, it's wrong to kill anybody. And of course that would be the proper response. People need to maintain that kind of facade in public. But this is what they really think. Cowards, nobody will acknowledge my existence openly, but out on the anonymous internet, Kira rules. He's all over the place." And that's a very interesting quote, because Light is arguing that, people have a facade where they say, oh, killing is wrong, but deep down, they believe that something needs to happen to the violent criminals of the world. And so, in a way, he's right, and he's justified in doing what he's doing, which I believe he's wrong in that just because the other people think it's right, that doesn't make it morally good in order to do that, unless you believe that morality is subjective to certain subcultures, in which case it might be seen as a form of good. And so Light thinks that he's not doing anything wrong in the process, and it's okay to do this. However, the police, and especially L, say that there is a process to all of this. You can't simply go around killing criminals. There needs to be a sense of justice, and many of these prisoners were already sentenced to crime, or sentenced to time in jail, or even to death sentences. And Light can't go around, dishing out his own justice. Lord Kira can't be doing that. And so they would argue that killing isn't right in that regard, and that if there's any killing, it has to be done by the state. It has to be done judiciously rather than at the will and desire of Light or Lord Kira. And I do think those people are probably more right here, in my personal opinion, and that might be what Ohba is trying to say. However, I also think that it's important to look at Light's real motives on this, and that he explicitly says he wants to be viewed as God. He wants to shape society in his own image, which in that way, he's not trying to do it for judicious reasons. He's trying to do it for his own selfish desires and his own sense of power and maybe prestige, because he's the one who's really in charge of society. So maybe Ohba is trying to point out the gaps in Light's morality here, or how he's sort of denying himself the truth of what he's actually doing, and that's probably going to cost him down the road. Another interesting aspect of this short story is the boredom that takes place here, possibly giving way to more about this morality and how Light says he's justified, but ultimately he's just bored. This is just an attempt for him to do something to create some interest in his life. So he's probably not doing this for morally righteous reasons. He's just bored, and so is the Shinigami. Like, there's no purpose here. There's only death. Like, they got bored with life, so now they're playing around and creating their own rules and sort of just doing things to spark up interest for themselves. So very nihilistic, that like maybe there's no purpose behind what's going to happen here, or like why people are dying. It's just, Light and the Shinigami just sort of playing around and hoping something fun happens for themselves, which will probably bring no peace for the people whose loved ones are dying. Other things about this, I do think it is an exciting thriller, a very interesting sort of whodunit, or not whodunit, but a game of cat and mouse. Is L going to catch Light? What's going to happen to Light as he progresses through the story? Will he become more sadistic, more driven to violence? Well, that remains to be seen, but I'm very much looking forward to seeing what happens throughout the rest of the series. And then related to that are L's conclusions. It doesn't really feel like he's taking big leaps in logic. Everything he comes to, every conclusion he arrives at, feels very natural and helps the story move along as well. For example, like him sort of guessing that, or not really guessing, but sort of figuring out by how something was broadcast where Light might be in Tokyo. That feels very natural, because we can see in our own world that some things, at least in the past, were broadcast only in certain areas or only in certain countries. So you can kind of make reasonable conclusions. That might not be as feasible nowadays because everyone can stream everything, but L can sort of make those conclusions, and we can see how he did that without it sort of being like, oh, he's jumping from this point to that point without there being any reason behind that, and it doesn't create a natural sort of progress between L and Light and how they're figuring out who each other are. Anyway, those are my thoughts on Deathnote Volume 1, a pretty fun manga. I did enjoy reading this, and I'm very much looking forward to reading the second volume and more. I found this at my local library. Don't forget to patronize your local libraries. They might have fun and exciting manga. And I highly recommend that you go out and read this as well. Because if you're a fan of the Berserk series, or you're a fan of manga in general, and you haven't read Deathnote, then this is definitely worth pursuing. It's taken me 21 years to finally get to Deathnote, but I'm having a lot of fun. And I should point out that I have watched maybe the first season of the Deathnote series. It was good, but I haven't watched it all, so I think I'll probably watch more of it after I finish with this overall manga here. Anyways, if you have any thoughts on this, or you want to comment on what I've said here, let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear from you. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can find out about this author or this series if they don't already know. Also join the Discord if you want to have further conversations about manga, books, TV, various stuff like that. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and God of Death travels. Farewell.